None declared. Move on to item 2 of the agenda, approval of the consent agenda.
I had something, I don't remember what it was though. Oh, I wasn't at the special meeting minutes, but Monty is shown as calling the meeting to order and also being absent.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
That's impressive, Mom.
Just gonna say, so what are you questioning?
I will fix that, thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Thanks, Anthony.
Clearly he reads them.
Nice catch.
Went full nerd on that one.
Anything else in the consent agenda? All right, entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Anthony and a second by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, straight to item 3, financial statements. Jeremy.
Just a couple updates. Obviously July was a good month, so it was warm. A couple of things I didn't know, when you look at July over July from last year, you'll notice that the industrial class was down in consumption relative to last year in 19. The reason being on that, there's 2 days difference in the billing cycle. We're still manually reading the industrial meters just because we want to make sure that those are accurate. So when you look at July of 19, we actually billed on 33 days in July of 19, and only 31 this year. So that 2-day difference, when you annualize out on a daily basis, really, we were only off about 2% from last year. So we talked a little bit, I talked to staff a little bit about that today, about what can we do with the technology? Is the technology available now to get us to making sure we're reading all of our meters through the AMI system? So we've got a couple, we've got our industrial meters that we're still manually reading, and then we've got the 2 meters that aren't AMI system that are running solar systems, so the city's meter at the solar array, and then also the Genesis, that meter system down there. We're still manually reading that. I think when those originally got installed, we didn't have the capability in those AMI meters to do the net metering and reading the pushback power from the solar array. So I have Dave checking in. Census has come up with the next generation of meters that are supposed to have more capability and more reporting features. So he's going to check in to see if we can get to the point with the technology side of things to put in those types of meters at the other 5 sites that we're not manually reading. Because really at this point with the system that we're running, we should be able to read all the meters remotely in our office. So there is still a little timing difference some months on the industrial side depending on when the weekends fall. So last year, Saturday and Sunday fell on June 29th and 30th. So we read June's month. So if we go back to June's last year, you'll see it's inverse of July. So just wanted to note that really an industrial class really isn't down that much relative to last year. Year to date's accurate through July 31st. So we're kind of right back where we were for 19. So that's a good thing. Did note in the notes the power cost adjustment. Hope you guys were able to see that piece. We should have charged about 62,000 power costs in July. The piece that we have with the timing on that is after we get all the data from system control for all the MISO transmission costs, we only have about 2 to 3 days to get the billing down to our outsourced company to process the billing and stuff. And so we caught it, but it wasn't fast enough before they already started processing the bills down there. And so I just made the decision, we're not going to have that company rerun all our new bills. We're just going to add it onto the August bill. So that's why we're light this month for power costs. We should have a power cost adjustment like I mentioned in June. We didn't apply it, so we'll apply that in August, which unfortunately means in August will probably be a higher power cost adjustment than what there should have been because we didn't capture that additional revenue in July when we should have. So I just want to note there, otherwise, if you take that into consideration and then the 2 billing days in July, we actually had a better July 2020 than we did 2019, so we're right on pace with where we should be. So August, I'm anticipating it being a pretty good month too. It's been hot, and obviously the muggy weather we've had, we've been generating some market sales and things of that nature. I did look at the market sales for July. We had about $88,000 in market sales. So between, we had the big unit running quite a bit. We had some things on our unit 5 or 6 and 7. We've had some issues with some oil down there spraying out on some of the valve areas, and so Caterpillar is here this week fixing that. They had the same problem down in Owatonna. What they think is there's not enough piping in there to capture some of that fine mist on the pipe. And so it was hitting some of our sensors right off of the engine. So how we're really configured down there is we have the engines and then going straight up just a short distance of the pipe where those sensors are. They think some of that fine mist was hitting that sensor before it could collect on the pipe, and so it was tripping our engines down there. In July, we've had a little bit in August, and so we've actually been using this big one for some hedging within our community, and then the excess we've been selling in the market. Where typically we'll use these down here for the hedging, or if we can't keep those things running, they keep tripping. That we're using some of that. So Unit 6 was the one that we were having the issues with, so they're repiping it this week. That seemed to fix the issue down in Owatonna, so hopefully we'll get those things kind of back in normal. But we still had a pretty good month for the big unit out there. This thing's been running, I think, the last 3 or 4 days. I've come to work, so they've been pushing power in the market as well. On there, so I did look at, we got about 132,000 in market sales today through July. We anticipate we'll be up over 200,000 by the end of August. We're on track. We had a $15,000 day yesterday. We were $5,000. We had a $5,000 day this morning through like 9 or 10 o'clock this morning. So I'm anticipating another $15,000 market sale day that way. So still probably won't be. I think Anthony had asked the question last month, kind of where are we anticipating being at the end of the year? I think at about 550,000 budget in market sales. I don't think we'll hit that unless we have a stay fairly warm in September and October. I think we'll maybe be around 300,000, maybe 300 to 400,000, depending on the market prices and some of that stuff. So prices have come up the last couple weeks on the market. A little bit more so we're capturing some of that stuff, some of those prices. So, but overall, still doing pretty well on that side. And then the gas side down just a little bit. Consumption is obviously down, and that'll probably trend that way unless we have a real cool fall. We had a fairly warm spring, March and April. We had significant reduction in sales, obviously, which is the converse to the electric sales on that market. The one piece that was a positive for a customer, from the customer standpoint, is our gas pricing overall, which we apply the power cost or the fuel cost adjustment to. We had a lot of low fuel cost. A lot of the fuel that we purchased for a lot of our residential and commercial customers, we bought off the market, and the market prices, obviously, the last couple of months were down in the about $52 range. And so customers that aren't contract customers saw a pretty good sized credit relative to the amount of gas they used. We're at $3.77 in credit for MCF, and so we're typically in that $1.50 range. And so that was good from that perspective. Otherwise, year to date, we're sitting pretty well on most things, trending where we kind of thought we would be. I guess that's probably the main couple of things I wanted to mention. Any questions on any of the financial stuff?
You seen any continued trends with the COVID changes that we had?
Yeah, the commercial side. I mean, the trend I'm seeing is the commercial sector is back for the most part. We're trending with a lot of our usage back to where the pre-COVID numbers were. So that's been good. The residential's been trending high. All the stay at home and obviously whether that's continually trending. I think obviously we'll see the residential side be above normal with the hybrid format of what the school district is using, what people have. That's been a consistent trend. The commercial has trended back to normal, so that's been good. The industrial class is back to, they've been fairly constant through the whole thing. Again, their stuff is more operational. Things, their production lines and the equipment that they're running, when those things are staying fairly stable and they're running the 2-3 shifts, those things stay pretty constant. They are going to have, we're going to be talking with 3M next week. They're going to have a shutdown Labor Day weekend. They typically have it for Memorial Weekend. They didn't have it this year for Memorial Weekend, so I would anticipate there'll be some light kilowatt hours in September. One of those days if they shut the whole plant down for a day or two to do their in-house upgrades and housekeeping, we'll see a little bit of reduction there. Which you guys it'll be noticeable because they'll usually run 300,000 kilowatt hours a day, and so if they're down for one day, you'll notice it on the financials and the consumption. But other than that, things are trending fairly consistently back to where we anticipate those to be. We had our highest peak load in July. So far this year, July 8th, we hit 55.9 megawatts. So our highest load before that was 48, so we're starting to see some 55 days, some 54 days. 3 of those running yesterday 16.9 megawatts per hour, so their loads significantly up on that. So kind of not where our highest peak loads have been. Traditionally, we've been around 60, but I think our new probably norm is around that 56. Obviously, with some of the things going on in the industrial sector and some reductions there, we've seen some of that megawatt come down, but those are still pretty good peak loads where we're at now, so.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Monty and second by Matt. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that brings us to the open forum. I don't see any guests here today. And then 5, communication. It's back to you, Jeremy.
Not a whole lot really to talk about. I gave you guys some updates the other day. Those are kind of the big things going on. Touch a little bit with Dan on the capacitor bank project going on. That's kind of been slowed down. They originally got a quote back on one of the breakers that needs to go in that capacitor bank with there. Apparently it's more of a unique breaker for the type of system they're putting in there. And so their original estimate was $100,000 for the breaker, what came in at $300,000 with also an additional extended lead time for that. So they're going to look at some different options with Siemens. They may have a different breaker option that they can use in there. And so really from a time frame, we thought that was going to start probably this fall. Some of the groundwork and some of that. The latest thing Dan has heard from GRE and MRES and MISE and those guys is that probably most likely the groundwork probably won't start until next spring now because of some of the lead times and some of these things, even if they get a cheaper version of the breaker. So that's kind of in limbo right now. So sometime spring, maybe through next fall of 2021, maybe that capacitor bank will be in. It's just good for you guys to know there's no cost to us. It's just they're adding it to that site. GRE did say that they absolutely want to have that substation down in June, July, and August of next year.
Good.
So they have to work around that. So even if all the equipment and the materials are here in the spring, and they get it late spring where they want to start doing it in June or July or August, it'll have to sit there for 3 months because that's a huge substation out there for transmission. And so obviously in the summertime, the peak times of the year, you can't have that thing down. So that's a constraint that the developers are going to have to work around. That's just out limits for those 3 months. So outside of that, that's been going pretty good. I gave you an update on the insurance, kind of claim where that's at. Mark and I talked a little bit this morning about the next steps on just trying to wrap that insurance claim up and get that resolved from there. Otherwise, for the most part, the building side of things have been going good here. Our projects have been moving along, a lot more maintenance project things. I guess that's one other thing I should have maybe mentioned on the financials. When you look at the salary and laborers area, Jared and I talked a little bit about that. It's a little bit higher than what you typically see through this time of the year relative to what I budget. And the big part of that is that we're doing more maintenance than we are capital project work. And so if we're not doing capital project work, we're not billing into work orders that get capitalized. They're just being expensed as payroll. And so that's kind of the opposite. Doesn't change anything from a cash perspective. It just reflects there's more expenses on the P&L statement than there normally would be on the balance sheet. So, but otherwise, maintenance has been going good. Things we had a couple of outages. I mentioned the one over by Peace Lutheran last month. They put in some new conductor over there. They found the fault was spliced. Some new stuff was spliced with some old stuff. And so they just decided to take out the old stuff and splice in some new stuff with the new stuff. And so hopefully that will resolve any issues that we have over there in the future. Otherwise, things have been going pretty good. Trying to keep up on some of the COVID-related things going on with some of the changes that are going on in the Department of Health and CDC. And so we'll be meeting with the management team to kind of go through the expectations of where things go with some of the new guidelines, and obviously with schools starting, that could change some dynamics with employees here and how we handle flexibility and schedule, and obviously critical employees, where we have critical employees here, and so daycare may be a part of some of those conversations. But we're working through that. Everyone's been receptive and have been following the protocols that we need to keep people safe here and keep people at work. So those are kind of the main things that are going on right now. Just trying to keep up on stuff.
Okay.
On the COVID conversation, Jeremy, where are you at, and how many of your, as an organization, where are you at, and how many of your employees are here every day? Are you still in any kind of rotation, anything like that?
No, we've been back, what I would say, back to our phase orange for 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks now, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So we have everyone coming back into work. Most of them are still isolated, like our field people, they're still isolated in their own vehicle. If there's actually a job where we have to have 2 people go to a job site, they have to wear the mask. If they're riding together in a car, so kind of watching that. But most of them are back. Every once in a while we'll have some people in the office. They either have to, they'll work from home because they have daycare issues or kid issues. But I would say 99% of the people are back into work on a daily basis. Now the piece that's changing some of the protocol with the CDC and the Department of Health is if you're around someone that's suspected of having COVID or has had COVID, it used to be, watch your signs, get tested if you're negative, you can come back to work. Now they're saying if you've been around someone that has it, you just need to stay home for 14 days. So they're kind of going backwards from where they were several months ago. So the piece that potentially creates a concern for us is, obviously we've got people with kids in school, right? So when the kids gets it in school, or they bring it home, we're gonna have those guys just not coming to work for 14 days. So the piece that we've talked about, which we haven't really talked to the management group yet, but Angie and I have talked about it, as the safety people here, is can we have these guys just working out of their home? So can they get in their truck, take a truck home, can they get in the truck and go in the field and do things individually where they're not subject to the customers? So is it maintenance on transformers, is it maintenance on boxes, versus them just sitting around at home and staying home? Because a couple of concerns we've had are, one, if I don't have the symptoms, I don't want to sit at home, I want to work. And 2, if you're going to make me sit at home or not make me work, I don't want to have to use 80 hours of sick time. They don't want to have to use accruals if they're healthy. And so those are some of the concerns that we've had from the employee body and obviously the union side of things. So we're going to try to work through some protocols, try to be as flexible as we can, but also make sure that we're not subjecting the public to a potential case that we have within our own staff, and then also not subjecting other employees within the organization to that. So that will be the piece that we're going to have to navigate through is, do we have to have some type of quasi piece from being in the office to if one of the people gets it or doesn't get it, but their kid brought it home from school or whatever the case may be, which is probably no different than a lot of you guys in your organizations too, with having staff and have kids. So, but everyone's back at work at this point and following the protocols and wearing the masks when you get out of your office. And features.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mark, do you have anything today?
Nothing.
All right. All right, agenda item number 6, policies. See, we have a number there that we're up for review. And then 6B, we have a couple with changes that need approval. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yep, so there's just a few minor changes that we're asking the board to approve. One is in the definition of your bill area. The county now has a local county tax, similar to Hutchinson having the local tax, and so we want to make sure that we're accounting for that on the bill because that needs to be collected in the revenue of the county. So we just need to add the county tax as a description that will be on customer's bill to our policy. And then the second one, under the explanation of billing procedure, the notice where we say we're going to notice will be included on the monthly bill of a pending disconnection. We no longer do that when we move to the new billing software. We quit putting that description or that disclaimer on the bill that, hey, on your next month bill, if you don't pay, you're going to get that. Because we use multiple methods. We use emails, we use phone calls, we do other avenues. We send separate letters, disconnection letters when those things are in play. And so we don't put those things on the bill anymore because the bill is already full with plenty of other stuff. And a lot of times people don't even look at their bills anyway. So this makes it useless. So we should have caught that last year because we haven't been doing it since 2017 or 18. So we found this year we need to get that off because we're not doing that. So we just need you guys to approve just omitting that piece. So those are the two minor details that we need to have you guys approve in those two policies.
Any questions regarding those changes?
I'd make a motion to approve those 2 changes.
Second.
Motion by Matt and second by Anthony to approve both item 6BI and 6BII. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? There's a lot of eyes
A lot
on
of
that
eyes.
session right there. All right. Number 7, we do not have any unfinished business, which takes us right into 8A, approve rate adjustments for 2020 and 2021.
So we've talked a little about this last month at the commission meeting. I'd sent some information out prior to that meeting, just to kind of make sure that we're staying on top of our rate structure changes in those glide paths. Obviously, you guys are all familiar with the glide paths. So I guess I won't rehash all the details unless you have specific questions on that. The direction at the last month's meeting was, yeah, we still want to keep moving down the glide paths. We haven't had anything majorly happen that has changed dynamically in our community. We still feel that we're in good shape financially, but we don't need to change the rates to increase revenues from our customers as part of the billing structure, that we want to stay revenue neutral at this point. But we still want to move down the glide paths, 6 years on the electric side and 9 years on the gas side, to make sure that the classes are being equitable, that everyone's paying their fair share of the cost of Hutchinson Utilities doing their business. So making sure we're appropriately covering our fixed costs with more of a fixed charge, and make sure we're covering our variable costs with more of an energy charge, which is more of a variable charge. So what's in the packet today is just bringing back kind of the summary projected revenues. I'm using 2020 numbers, and then projecting that out if we had 2020 rates and 2021 new rates. Give you guys an idea that we're staying fairly revenue neutral, that just the classes are changing, how we're collecting those things. And then a resolution in the packet that we did the last time we went through this back in 2017 for the commission to adopt. And then the time frame on that would be, if you guys approve the next 2-year rate adjustment on the customer classes for both the electric and natural gas side, I would take this resolution, add it to some summary data, provide my memo, like I did the last time, to Matt and Melissa down at the city. We would potentially have it, or I think the goal right now is to have it on September 8th. Council meeting for consideration and conversation, I'll go down and put on the presentation and provide whatever information they want. If they want to show up in person and talk about it, they will. And then if they follow the same path that they did last time, they would have 2 weeks to think about that. And then at the second council meeting in September, they would have the ability to veto the rate adjustments that you guys would approve today. And if they take no action, then they would be in place, and we would put those in place October 1st, which again is the fall time of the year. And we purposely did that because consumption on both sides, electric and gas, are fairly low, and so the rate adjustments just have no real varying impact. It's very minimal that people won't see it, so we've purposely done that. And so I just recommend that we stay consistent with the October 1st time frame on that. So
Do you have any reason to have any concern or anything from a council perspective of anybody having major questions on this?
I'd be really surprised if that were the case. Jeremy did a great job 2 years ago when you initiated this program and talked about how it was going to be coming in a 3-step phase or 3-step program. So certainly the council members that were on at that time are expecting it to happen. I have had a couple of conversations with Matt, and the city's prepared to use the same process it did 2 years ago with this, and I guess I really don't anticipate any problems, at least from what I know at this point.
Jeremy, do you plan to go to that council meeting then and
Yep.
answer if there are questions?
Yep, I will. And the only 2 questions I really got last time, and they were just more questions, were, one, is this gonna have a major impact on the low users? The older people that are low users, because we're increasing the monthly charge, and so as a percent, it looks bigger for them, because they don't have a whole lot of energy use. So that was a question that came up, and there will be some of that, a little more of an incremental increase on low users than on the high users. So that was a question that came up, and then the other one that came up was, by shifting the bill, that making sure that we're having more of a monthly charge to cover our fixed costs, is that disencouraging distributed generation or solar in the community? That was the other question that came up, and so I talked about that. And I'll be prepared to talk about those things again. Obviously, back then, it really didn't discourage solar because people are putting in solar, and it's even less of a concern now because the solar pricing for materials has come down so cheap that they're still able to have a fairly good payback even with the monthly charge going up. And so we're already seeing, I can speak to, we've had multiple solar rates going up since then, even when we've done the shift. people are moving towards electric vehicles. We've had multiple, home chargers going in with a rebate program. So the monthly charge, that stigmatism of the base monthly charge is discouraging renewables. It just isn't happening. So, and I'll be able to speak to some of the things that we're seeing up here.
Okay.
I'd like to comment on that. Anthony, you said earlier you went full nerd. I did too on this subject. And I got to thinking about that, and Jeremy, it's exactly what you just talked about the low-end user, seasonal, whatnot. And I pulled a couple of invoices from something that I have, and in the off months, so about 8 months out of the year, I'm paying about $7.80 per kilowatt. It's the old, I think Ron White was a comedian that said, how far did you glide? All the way to the side of the crash. The glide path that you chose, what you did 2 years ago, was spot on, and this has just reinforced it for me. It just, you look at what it looks like when it's meant to go good, but it doesn't, and then you look at what it looks like this, and this is absolutely spot on. I'm more convinced now than ever it's the right thing to do. So.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Entertain a motion on item 8A.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion to approve, I should say. So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Monty and second by Matt. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item 8B, approve sale of capacity to Nextera Energy Marketing.
So, you guys approved a contract a while back for AEP for 20 megawatts, and I sent you that's capacity. They revised that capacity chart that we're using for our budgeting aspect. One, because I think it's important to kind of see what we have in place, how long out, because I only talk about it usually once a year when the budgets come around, we talk about some of those things. And so I sent those all to you. Well, back before we went into that last AEP contract for 20 megawatts, there was conversations about Unit 1 and where that thing goes in the future. And so after you guys approved that AEP contract for 20 megawatts, we still had 20 megawatts of capacity that we felt comfortable looking to sell, 20 to 25 megawatts capacity. And so since that time, I've been trying to work on finding a price structure that would fit selling their 20 megawatts. I can tell you it's taken me about 6 months to try to get $3 out of the market. Right now it's even cheaper than that. So I've been going back and forth with different wholesale suppliers, some different consulting firms. And it just happened to fall on to this one. We've talked with Christy, we met about 1.5 years ago for NextEra. She's one that came up, and we've met in a couple different places. And we were mainly talking with her at first on tolling and energy contracts. That's kind of her specialty, is on the tolling and energy side of things. We tried making Unit 1 work for energy. Of course, I've talked to you guys about the inefficiency of that engine if we're running a single cycle and just the market's so cheap on the energy side of things. And so we couldn't get anything undone on the energy side. I did talk to her a couple of meetings after that about, is there ever any opportunity for you guys who are they're large players like AEP in the public sector, and so they provide capacity to municipal utilities, government utilities, investor-owned utilities around the country, of buying some capacity. And they originally came back and said, yeah, we are, but the pricing structure that they're looking at wasn't conducive for what I thought our capacity could be at. Obviously, we've looked at our wholesale generation models internally, and I knew what the value of our capacity would be, and so we worked with AEP for a while. They weren't only willing to give us 250 at the most market side of things. They were willing to go to 3 if we wanted to extend some of our capacity out to 2035 or 2040. So on the short end, you get 250. On the long end, you get 350, 325. And if you blend all together, they can get you around 270. Of course, internally, we don't feel comfortable about going out past 2030. The reason being, we're not sure where that big unit's going to be and what the functionality of that thing's going to be in the next 10 years. So we already had AEP locked up through 2030, so we already had to keep the big unit in play for that capacity. So as far as we were willing to go, we were only willing to go to 2030, where all of our capacity contracts end that are predominantly tied to the big unit. The Rice Lake utility is kind of a separate, that's tied to more of the unit 6 and 7 unit. But that big unit, that's one where by the time 2030 comes around, that'll be 37 years old. It's starting to get to the end of its useful life. That's a 40, 50-year plant. Of but it gives us the ability to look out over the next 4 or 5 years to see how much more of the landscape has changed with renewables, with energy storage, with really the market pricing side of things. Again, I don't see long-term, when I look at the future market pricing, that the energy side of things is gonna be significantly positive for us to run that unit in more of a tolling arrangement like we had with TransAlta, just with the market pricing in general. But the capacity side, if you can find the right people, or you take time to do legwork, you can find hopefully something that fits. And so through that process, she went to her origination desk, which is just a separate division in NextEra, out of the Florida branch, and asked.
Let's pause just one quick second. Regarding contract language, contract, everything else, do you have anything to add before you need to go?
Yes, sign
Could you be a little more clear?
it. No, I thought everything was in order. We had a chance to talk about it a couple of times. I have no concerns about it.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Yep. Nice night.
All right, go ahead, Jeremy.
So we worked with their desk. This is probably already went over. We worked with the desk. She came back and she said, we're willing to, I said, we need to at least be at a minimum of $3. That's the value that we think that this unit's going to be. And so she went back and they were willing to pay $3 for it. They originally wanted a 10-year contract, which would take it up to 2035. I just said, we're just not comfortable going 10 years because we just don't know that unit's going to be in play. And so she went back to her desk and they said, yep, 5 is fine. Could you do 21 megawatts? Because they're working on a contract, and if you notice in the contract, the approval of this contract is contingent on them approving the contract with the buyer in September. So, she's told me that it's just a matter of signing the paper that the municipal utility that needs the capacity is gonna sign that. But I was comfortable with having that contingency in there, because if we send it with them and they can't sell the capacity, then we're back, then they're stuck, and I don't wanna create that partnership where we're not willing to do that. So I said, yep, that's fine, put that provision in there. So I told her I would let her know after today if the board was okay with it, but I think it touches on a few things. It locks up basically the excess capacity that we have through 2030, that extra block that we had. It gets us at a price where I think we need to be to make our wholesale internal generation model work. If you've looked at those numbers over the year, if we can generate somewhere in that $2.5 to $3.5 million in sales outside of our billing customers here, that makes that cash flow model work, where we're in a position where we're not paying any more for having local generation that we're selling and maximizing those versus just buying capacity ourselves. So the internal model works, and it also provides us, again, some local reliability. We've got some major concerns with transmission lines going down. We've got plenty of local generation to keep our community up and running. So the model continually works, at least from the capacity side of things, and so that's why we need to maximize the capacity side of that. So kind of on that total line that I put down below for you guys, just on the capacity side, all through 2030, we'll be in that 2.7 to $2.9 million range just on capacity sales. So that works well for our business model, our wholesale internal. Any of the energy sales we get now would be just a bonus on top of that. So whether if by chance at some point we can find a tolling agreement, great, but more than likely it's going to be using it when we can on the market to get market sales when price is competitive on that. From the CIP standpoint of things, when I look out 5 to 10 years, we've got some minor things. We've got some boiler updates we have to do a little bit. We've got a leak in the boiler, auxiliary boiler over there that has to be done. We have to do a few little roof repairs out there. The one big piece that may be out there will be the overhaul on that unit. We're estimating that about $700,000, but that's really going to be depending on how often we run that unit. So we've got it scheduled for 2022, but we're not running it nearly what we thought we were going to be this year, even in market sales. So that one just kind of keeps moving out. There's a certain hour range on those units where by warranty and manufacturing specs, you then have to have an overhaul on that piece. So that could get pushed out 4 or 5 years, depending on how we run that cycle piece. So that would be probably the biggest thing that I would see in this 10 years of time span is that overhaul on that unit. On that. Couple of risks I did tell you, we're pretty much maxed out as far as those capacity contracts. We'll have, we've got 65 megawatts of capacity sold out now. AEP's got 45, and then we've got the Rice Lake, that's 20 now. that one will drop off in 2025, and so from 2025 to 2030, we'll have 60 megawatts locked up. That does leave us a little buffer if we keep our current generation in place today. You know, like I mentioned, about 6 megawatts conservatively. Again, that's with a 1% escalator with load growth that we may have. Now, we haven't hit 1% load growth since I've been here. We've hit 0.5%, but things could change too, and so we'd rather be on the long end of having enough buffer to meet regulatory requirements than not. The piece I can tell you on renewable side of things, when if we put in a solar array, right now they don't really give you a full 1 credit of capacity for 1 megawatt. Up here we get about 25% of a megawatt. So if we would put in a 1 megawatt solar array, we'd get 250,000 kilowatt hours of capacity. Just because they're not dependable, you can't generate on a dime because the sun doesn't shine. They have been talking about moving some of that up, so if some of those capacity constraints move up to enable more renewables to be in the capacity market, to get more value for that, then those things would only help a renewable situation that we have in town. So when I kind of looked at the long-term approach and kind of where we're at with capacity, that was a good lease spot for us to land on the $3 piece. It just matter if you guys are comfortable locking up to 20 megawatts on that piece, but it fits well within our wholesale business model. It keeps us with enough buffer on our regulatory requirements. The two downsides I said that are risks for us obviously are if we have significant load in the community, or if somebody gets some big customers in town, where that all of a sudden our buffer on the regulatory side gets squished on, we may need to have to buy some capacity just to make sure we have enough to fill that requirement. Or if we have some major units or some units that we just want to scrap because they're too old or we just can't get parts from anymore, you know, and we lose 10 megawatts because we have to get rid of units 2 and 3 or some of those, then we may need to buy a little bit of capacity too. We're not anticipating in the next 10 years that we'll have to get rid of any units. And the older units that we have, units 3 and 4, there's about 8 megawatts there. Very little maintenance. They're just there basically for capacity. We don't run them. They're in good shape. So, you know, the biggest cost that I would see that we'd have on our current fleet would be on unit 1. Unit 8 we're taking out of service. So that's factored in. You know, we're decommissioning that. We'll be scrapping that here when time permits. So with the existing fleet that we have, it fits all the obligations we need with minimal costs on those things. Units 5 and 6 and 7, which is, you know, about almost 30 megawatts. Those are all new units, and so we shouldn't have major concerns or issues there on that one. So it kind of stops, kind of a long story, but on that piece, but it just fits well with what we need, and it maximizes our assets that are worth as much as what we have to make things work internally. So, any questions on the capacity contract? We did send you the separate master agreement. I didn't put that in the packet because it's just a lot, but it's basically the same type of structure. There's really 2 documents that the energy industry uses, the Edison Institute that name us the other one on that. So a lot of the capacity agreement references that master agreement. So.
They missed the chicken in the room, missed
First
the
I thought it was a phone.
part of the agenda where they can publicly speak.
So what kind of new business or industrial business would have to come into town to eat up that much capacity? What would you be looking at? Trying to determine the likelihood that we'd run up against something.
It's not very likely. We would probably need, where we'd start having a concern, we'd probably need 2 companies coming in that running 4 to 5 megawatts a piece.
And in reference, I believe one of our industrial users has dropped about 4 megawatts in a 10-year window.
Right.
So it's 2 pretty big companies.
We need some large, or someone that's got some huge load that's running something that they're just running some major equipment. But chances are probably fairly unlikely, but it's just something you guys need to be aware of. That to me, that's a good problem. If we're starting to get that type of load here, for the amount that we're going to pay for the little capacity is going to well be offset by the additional revenue that we're collecting in load. So, but I do want to make you aware of that piece. It would be more likely that we would have, that I would come to you and say, we got to get rid of some units before I see the next 10 years that we're going to have that kind of load coming in town. We looked at we had for a while, we had the data centers. That was a big one, that was 6 to 8 megawatt load. Those things have kind of went by the wayside. Those things aren't real promising. Right now with data mining and stuff, that's really kind of slowed down the Bitcoin and stuff like that. So, that something like that where they're running all this stuff and they're just energy hogs. You would have that, but so it's not likely, but it's just out there that we just have to keep an eye on.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions?
I had some questions coming into it, but you answered them, Jeremy. My questions were mostly around looking forward in our generation capital expenditures, because we forecast out about 10 years or so. Does this capacity contract line up with what we're intending to do with our generation? And I found today the answer is yes.
I will say that unit, obviously we've talked about it before, that one we just have to keep on the horizon, right? At some point, the financials interim model may flip the other way where it doesn't make sense to keep a type of unit here because of technology and the way things are going. We've talked about that internally too. But there's enough serviceable life in there with minimal cost relative to what we're getting into capacity contracts that still makes sense, at least out to 2030. After that, it's a whole different game, which is why we're not comfortable coming to you guys with something out past the next 10 years. So that's just too far out.
Makes sense to me. Any other questions? Entertain a motion on item 8B.
So
I'll second.
Motion by Anthony and second by Matt. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8C, rate schedule for electric vehicle chargers.
So we kind of want to be ahead of this. Obviously, we don't have the fast charger in yet, just because there's still a lot of traffic going on down in that intersection. Until that slows down, we'll get that in. Obviously, we're ready to go. The electricians are ready to go. But Dave talked about it, so let's just get the rate. Let's go in front of the commission, get the rate adopted, so we don't have to come back and wait once we have the charger and adopt the rates. So that once that gets in, we can set the rates in that software and get that out there. So Dave's really been kind of the spearhead on this side of the things. He's been a part of that CERT team. That it's kind of that cohort there where they talk about EV chargers and the Volkswagen settlement dollars and how do we grow the infrastructure in the network in the state? What are people putting in? What type of cost structures are you using? What's the rates you're using? And so he's been on those conversations and those calls weekly for the last several months. And a lot of the rates that are being decided are different based on what the utility is looking to get out of the fast charger. Some utilities saying, hey, we want to cover all of our costs. We want to cover the cost of that unit that we're putting in. We want to cover the costs of all the software and administrative time. We want to cover all the infrastructure costs because these things are going in a remote site or a site where we don't have a lot of infrastructure, and so we want to make sure over time we're covering those costs. Some utilities are saying we just are putting them in as a convenience and just being a part of the industry, and we know EVs are coming and it helps service some general load, and so we're going to create a rate that's reasonable to entice people to use those chargers. And then you get people in the middle that want to cover some costs, but don't want to make it so expensive that it deters people from using the utility scale chargers where they're going to go down the street and use the one at the gas station. So the rates really are all over the place. So Dave and I kind of talked about that, and we don't think at this point it makes sense to really change and have a separate rate classification for that fast charger. And so the one that we thought was probably the most appropriate was the small general rate class at that 9 cents a kilowatt hour charge. I will tell you, in the conversations we've been in, that's one of the cheaper rates that he's been hearing about. A lot of the metro rates, and utilities, what they're trying to recover are more in that 12, 13, 14 cent range. But there's a couple of reasons why we're proposing the 9 cent range. One, where we're putting it, our infrastructure is already there. So we don't have to run feeders. There isn't really no major infrastructure costs. Two, it'll cover potential over time some of the costs of the equipment. The administrative time to us is very minimal. It's pretty much automated with a billing system and a data file, so there's not much there. And really it's more of a philosophy that we don't have a ton of cost to cover. We're looking to start putting these things as a conveniency for the community and putting them in municipal locations so that people can use them, and they're relatively efficient, relatively inexpensive. And hopefully over time, as electrification grows, whether it's in-home charging, electric vehicles, that just helps create more of a consistent load from that sector by keeping the rates somewhat competitive. So if you look at, there's applications out there that you can plug this stuff into, and you can it gives you a cost per mile of gasoline versus the rate. So I had Dave just do that calculation, put it in your packet, so you can kind of see in a cost comparison standpoint, if we charge a rate of a little over 9 cents per kilowatt hour, you kind of go down to those little boxes, you can see comparing that to $2 gas or $2.09 on average. On the gasoline side of things, if an average car gets you 20 miles to a gallon, you're paying $2.09 a gallon per gas. Over the year, it's equating to about 10 cents a mile you're paying for gas. Where on the electric side at a 9-cent rate, it's about a third of that cost, about 3 cents a mile they're paying for the electricity. So it's obviously competitive. It's extremely competitive to the gasoline side of things. Obviously, a lot of times on the electric vehicles, it's more of an expensive vehicle than the gas, and so obviously there's an offset there as well. But we think that's a good price where we're covering what we need to and the minimum costs that we have for the installation in there. We don't have major infrastructure that we're running anywhere, it's right there. That's why we chose that spot. It's in a good location where infrastructure's at, so we don't have major costs moving forward. And then we thought we could watch it over time. We'll pilot it for the first year, see how it's being used, come back with you guys with some feedback. Hey, yep, the rate's good, or no, we need to adjust the rate because of this other thing. We come back on that. We thought this was a good starting point where it's not cheap, but it's not super expensive, where it creates people wanting to bypass the fast charger here and go to the next place.
Locally, what would be the next place? I'm not aware of anybody else that has it, but I'm sure there is.
So there's a couple. So let's talk about. There's a couple of municipal parking lots in the downtown area that have been talked about with the city. So the theory behind the utility system is that you're putting them in as much as possible in public spaces to be used by the community. So there's a couple other parking lots downtown that we could potentially put some in that have our infrastructure right there. And so that's been talked about with the city that after we get this first charger in. A couple of those conversations have been, do you keep putting in the fast chargers, which are more expensive, or do you put in the level 2 chargers that are about $3,000 a piece? And so I think Dave and the city have been talking. They thought, okay, if we put this first fast charger, and that's one where you can fully charge within a half hour. It's a real quick fast charge, and you can move on. The second phase that has been talked about is putting in maybe 2 more level 2 chargers in some of those other locations downtown, so that if someone wants to get 30% charge or enough charge and get them another 100 miles because they're going to the next community, they can do that with a level 2 charger that may take a half hour, 45 minutes. It's not going to give you a full charge or 99% charge, but it's going to give you enough to keep you moving down the road. Whether you're going Highway 15 or Highway 7, that's been a concept. It's cheaper for the utility if we're putting in level 2 chargers at $3,000 to $4,000 versus $50,000 to $60,000 with a fast charger. So that's an option. The other piece that we're starting to see out there, and that's a piece that we'll come back to on, but our third phase. So this would be our first phase, putting in the fast charger. Second phase would be putting in maybe some additional level 2 chargers in some of the community public areas. If we wanted to keep creating a little bit more of a utility network. Phase 3 starts getting into the commercial side of things, where we can offer rebates to incentivize commercial customers to put in chargers in their own businesses if they want to have it for convenience for their customers, because as electrification keeps going, more people are going to have electric vehicles is the concept, right? So you're starting to see that a lot in the metro area. You're starting to see partnerships between, I've been seeing partnerships between Walmart and Alberta Utility. I've seen some partnerships with Target and an investor-owned utility where they want to put some in their parking lots for their customers, customer conveniency. And so they're working with the utility typically to supply them the power. so they don't really wanna manage it, but they want this power supply, but they want it for convenience. So that, to me, would be a phase 3, conversation with you guys, cause I would anticipate, as we start seeing chargers in town, that, and people start buying vehicles like that you're gonna have, or we're gonna have customers potentially calling us and saying, hey, what would it take for us to put 3 or 4 chargers in our Walmart parking lot, or a professional building going, hey, I'd like to put one in, for customers, in my business. And so that would be a phase 3. And why I say that's a phase 3 is we'd have to have conversations about what your guys' comfort level is on how would you want to implement something like that. So would we just feed them the power? Would we be a part of, hey, we're willing to, you guys are buying all this stuff and we'll manage that stuff, like we're managing our own system? We're just saying, hey, we're gonna, through our rebate program, we're gonna just do an incentivizing program where, hey, if you wanna put in a charger, if it's a $3,000 charger, we'll give you $1,000 and incentivize you to put one in your own business. Again, with the overall concept of the incentivizing piece, or maybe potentially move into a phase 3 where you're getting more the business sector involved in it, is for an increased electrical load, right? And you're displacing gasoline with electric load, which helps out the public utility. So that's Dave and I's concept of 3-phase approach. Start with a fast charger, maybe add a couple more level 2 chargers, public chargers, and then we're gonna probably start getting some calls, or we could even be ahead of that and say, do we wanna roll out an incentive or a rebate program? Like our rebate program, and now we would just add to that some type of rebate to incentivize businesses if they wanna put them in their own business for whatever their reason is, we would offer that too. And certainly if you guys have other thoughts on some of that, we could incorporate those things in, but that would be a general glide path that we could use on that. Again, we don't have a lot of electric vehicles obviously in town personally. If people are putting them in their homes, again, I think we've gotten, in the last couple of months, I think we've gotten 2 or 3 requests. So people are putting them in their homes, or starting to put them in. So the people that are putting them in their homes here aren't gonna be using the community chargers because they're being charged at night. It's gonna be, how do we wanna set up the transportation system where we're at to entice people coming through to charge here versus going to the next community. So, you can do that a bunch of different ways, but I also think one of the businesses in town is moving their 2 chargers into town. They have 2 Tesla chargers out in the country now. I think they're getting a franchise agreement to put them in at their business in town down by Main Street. So there's gonna probably potentially be 2 Tesla chargers in town anyway as we put our fast charger in. So those things you're starting to see more of that here, more about just that option for businesses to provide for their customers for convenience, and knowing that people are gonna be driving electric vehicles. So.
Are you allowed to put signage up to direct them to those chargers?
We can put it up on ours, that's just part of a franchise agreement, and as long as it follows the sign ordinances in town, we're fine with that. I don't know what they're specifically doing. I would assume that with that particular business that they're giving the franchise agreement to, I'm assuming they can put something up, or there's some requirement that they would allow that to. The piece where it starts to get a little, because they originally wanted to put them in the company wanted to put it in public parking parking lot, which was one of the conversations. And so there was conversations about, okay, Hutch Utilities, do you wanna put them in, manage them, charge the rate, pay that? And we said, no, we don't want the Tesla chargers. We don't wanna have to manage 2 systems. We're starting to run ChargePoint, that's our platform. So the question that, some of the concerns at the city level were, if you're gonna allow a business to put them up in a public parking space, are you gonna allow anyone to use them, or is it just for those customers of the business? And so I don't know what all the conversations were. That was just my concern I expressed to them, that you start allowing them in public parking, if they're not public agencies, then how do you tell people they can't use them if it's in the public parking spot? So.
Right, good point.
But I do think there is a franchise agreement going in place, the last I heard, to allow those to come into town, so. for that particular business, so.
So regarding the rate, using a small general rate, so if we change the rate, like on the glide path for small general, would that automatically adjust this rate as well?
Yeah, what if we wanna follow that?
Because I think we probably should not do that, because we're not getting any fixed costs billing in regard to this. Because that would shift the rate down over time.
Correct. So we could set it just at this rate, and we're proposing to just leave it there, and then we could look at it annually and adjust it if we need to, if we don't.
I think that would be my preference. Without any fixed cost coming in, or, for revenue, I don't know why we'd want this to glide down.
Makes sense.
Works for me.
So I'd say we'd probably approve it at another small general rate, but the 9.05 rate.
I think that makes sense.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other questions, comments?
I'd make a motion to approve the pricing to match the current small general rate of 9.052 cents per kilowatt hour to be adjusted annually.
Second.
All right, motion by Anthony and second by Monty. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that completes today's agenda. Anything else, Jeremy?
That's all I have, unless there's any questions, on any of this stuff.
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion by Matt and second by Bob to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.